war not just of men, but of giants, of blood and honor, of faith and fury. One brother fell, but another rose to take his place. The Battle of David and Goliath recap. This is the untold story of a revenge that shook the kingdom of Israel, a forgotten warrior, a brother's fury in a battle that few remember, the Valley of Elah, a battlefield where the fate of Israel hung by a thread. On one side, a young shepherd armed with nothing but a sling and faith. On the other, a warrior feared by nations. Goliath of Gath, a giant of the Philistines. Day after day, Goliath mocked Israel. His voice echoed across the valley, daring anyone to face him. No man stepped forward, until David, a boy with no armor, no sword, but a heart that knew no. And then, in a moment that changed history, the unthinkable happened. The stone flew, striking its mark. Goliath staggered, then fell, a mountain of a man, brought down by a single act of faith. But what if someone else was watching? Someone whose heart burned with rage as his brother fell lifeless to the ground. But Goliath's brother was there that day. He saw it all. The disgrace, the humiliation, the way David stood over his fallen brother and took his sword, the way Israel cheered while the Philistines ran. In that moment, Lami felt something deeper than sorrow. He felt wrath, and he made a vow that would shape the course of history. David would pay, Israel would suffer, and the name of Goliath would not be forgotten. Who was Lami? The Bible gives us only a glimpse of him, but history whispers his story in quiet tones. In the ancient scriptures, specifically in 1 Chronicles 20:05, his name appears. Lach-mi, the brother of Goliath of Gath. He is known as a fierce Philistine warrior, a man who was trained for war from the day of his birth. He was a giant among men, a living testament to strength and martial skill. But Lach-mi was more than a name recorded in a forgotten verse. He was a survivor of an ancient and powerful bloodline, the Nephilim. These were the giants of old, the last of a generation that stood taller, fought harder, and struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. Lach-mi carried within him the legacy of these mighty warriors, a heritage that set him apart from ordinary men. He was not merely a soldier, but the very kin of Goliath, raised in the same crucible of war and hardened by the fires of battle. Every part of his being was forged for conflict. His hands were made for the art of combat, and his soul knew nothing but the relentless pursuit of victory in war. When Goliath fell at the hands of David, Lach-mi did not show any sign of sorrow. He did not cry or weep for his fallen brother. Instead, he burned with a fierce and unyielding fury. The loss of Goliath ignited a deep and powerful anger within him, a flame that would consume all other emotions. In that moment of grief and rage, Lach-mi swore an oath that would echo like a thunderclap across the lands of Israel. He vowed that he would avenge his brother no matter the cost. This vow was not a simple promise. It was a call to arms that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom of Israel. The gathering of forces, one man's vengeance, is not enough to shake a mighty kingdom, and Lach-mi knew this truth well. He understood that his burning anger and deep desire for revenge could not change the course of history on his own. He needed more than just passion. He needed an army. He needed to gather an unbreakable force to stand with him in his quest for retribution. So, Lach-mi turned to the Philistines, the warriors who had once fought by his brother Goliath's side. These men had witnessed the great fall of Goliath and had been overwhelmed by fear. They had fled in disgrace, their hearts heavy with the memory of defeat. Would these warriors find the strength to rise again and fight for their lost honor? At first, many of them hesitated. The shadow of David's victory loomed large over their minds, and the memory of Goliath's defeat haunted their every thought. Yet, Lach-mi did not let despair win. He spoke to them with a voice full of passion and fire, a voice that could spark a flame in even the coldest heart. He declared, "Goliath stood alone, but this time we shall stand together. We will strike as one and bring forth our vengeance." Slowly, the fear that once gripped them turned into a burning rage. The soft whispers of doubt transformed into powerful war cries that echoed across the lands. The Philistines began to rise once more, their courage rekindled by Lach-mi's fierce determination. But Lach-mi did not stop at rallying the familiar faces of his people. He needed more than just any soldiers. He required warriors of his own stature. Some say he journeyed far beyond the cities of the Philistines, seeking out other giants, Men like him, remnants of the ancient Rephaim, these were the last of their kind, survivors from a bygone age, waiting for a cause worthy of their might. And so the whispers began to spread like wildfire. A new war was coming, a war to reclaim honor, a war to bring down David, the famed giant slayer, and to restore the once mighty name of Goliath. Israel's greatest enemy had returned, and this time he was not alone. The conflict? Lahmi was not just another warrior, he was a master strategist. He was a man driven by deep, burning fury and fueled by clever, calculated planning. He had learned from his brother's downfall. He had witnessed firsthand what happens when a giant fights alone and is overcome. This time, he would not allow the same mistake to be repeated. Some say that every day, Lahmi trained with relentless determination. He perfected his skill with the spear until his strikes became as swift as lightning. His strength was legendary, and his speed was almost supernatural for a man of his great size. He did not seek battle merely for the sake of fighting. He sought to win. He wanted victory that would honor his fallen brother and restore his family's name. But brute strength alone could not secure his triumph. Lahmi knew that to defeat his enemy, he needed more than raw power. He needed accurate information, the kind that could be used like a well-sharpened weapon. He required precision and a plan that would allow him to strike at the exact right moment. And so, he turned to the shadows. The Philistines began sending spies deep into Israel, men who watched and waited silently. They gathered every detail about David's movements, about how he led his people, and about when he might be most vulnerable. They looked for any weakness that could be exploited in the coming battle. As the spies returned with their reports, the whispers of war spread throughout the land. Everyone began to wonder what would happen next, but one question hovered above all others. Would Lahmi challenge David himself? Would he step forward to face the giant slayer in a one-on-one battle, seeking to avenge his brother with his own hands? Or did he have another, more devious plan in mind? These thoughts and questions filled the air as the stage was set for a conflict that promised to shake the very foundations of both nations. Lahmi was ready to unleash his fury, armed with not only his legendary strength, but also a cunning plan that left no detail to chance. Then, the silence was shattered. The quiet of the land was replaced by the roar of battle cries. The Philistine banners were raised high, and their warriors marched once more with determination in their hearts. But this was no ordinary battle. This was an act of pure vengeance. This was a war of blood for blood. Every soldier, every warrior fought with the memory of their fallen heroes burning in their souls. At the heart of the Philistine army, Lahmi stood tall. His eyes burned with the memory of his fallen brother. His heart pounded with the promise of retribution, and his every breath spoke of a relentless desire to restore lost honor. His warriors, stronger than before, gathered around him, their resolve unbroken. They were ready to reclaim the honor that had been stolen from them. They vowed that Israel would not be spared from their wrath. In the land of Israel, the call to arms was sounded like a trumpet in the still morning air. The men of God assembled once again, led by the one who had struck down Goliath with unwavering faith. But David was no longer a young shepherd boy. He had grown into a mighty king, a seasoned warrior hardened by years of battle and countless encounters with formidable foes. He had faced armies, traitors, and giants. Yet this battle was different. This battle was personal. The weight of history pressed down on David like a heavy mantle. Would he stand once more against the brother of the giant he had slain? Would he be the one to face Lahmi in a duel of destiny, a challenge that would decide the fate of nations? As the armies prepared for war, a question echoed in the minds of both sides. Was this the moment when David would meet his greatest challenger? Or would another brave warrior from Israel rise to face the wrath of Lahmi? Did David fight Lahmi himself? The Bible holds a mystery that has puzzled many for centuries. The battle raged, swords clashed, and giants fell, but one question remains. Who struck down Lahmi? In 2 Samuel 21:19, we find a cryptic passage that speaks of a warrior named Elhanan who killed the brother of Goliath. Yet in another account, the name Lahmi is not mentioned at all. Instead, it simply states that Elhanan struck down a mighty Philistine warrior. So who was Elhanan? Was he simply one of many brave warriors from Israel? Or is there a deeper meaning behind this name in these events? Some scholars believe that Elhanan might have been none other than David himself, recorded under a different name in the ancient texts. Others suggest that he was one of David's most formidable soldiers, a man who fought valiantly alongside the king and carried out the mission of vengeance on the battlefield. But one truth remains clear: Lami was no ordinary foe. His battle was so fierce and significant that it shook the very foundations of Israel, leaving behind a legacy that would be told for generations. And yet, even with Lami fallen, the war was far from over. The echoes of that battle continued to reverberate across the land, hinting that this was only one chapter in a much larger story. The final battle, Mavis, Israel's champion. And so, the day of reckoning arrived. The sun hung heavy in the sky, casting long shadows over the battlefield. The air was thick with the scent of dust and iron. The silence before the storm pressing down on both armies. The Philistine warriors stood ready, their shields locked, their weapons drawn. And at their front, Lami. He was taller than the rest, broader, more terrifying, a true remnant of the giants. His spear, massive and sharpened to a deadly point, glinted under the sun. The rage in his eyes was unmistakable. This was not just a battle for him. This was vengeance. Across from him, Israel's forces stood firm. The men gripped their weapons, their hearts steady, their faith unshaken. And then a warrior stepped forward. Was it David himself? The giant slayer? The king who had once faced Goliath with nothing but a sling and a stone? Or was it Elhanan, a mighty warrior chosen for this moment? A soldier of Israel destined to finish what David had started. The two warriors faced each other, the battlefield silent for a breath, and then chaos. Lami struck first, his spear tearing through the air with the force of a storm. But Israel's champion was quick, dodging, countering, moving with precision. Steel clashed against steel, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Every strike was fueled by fury. Every movement carried the weight of history. Lami fought like a beast unleashed, his strength greater than any ordinary man. His blows could break shields. His roars could shake the hearts of even the bravest soldiers. But Israel's warrior did not stand alone. This was not just a battle of men. This was a battle of faith. With each clash, each step, Israel's warrior fought not just with skill, but with the power of the Lord Almighty behind him. And then the moment came, a final blow, a strike swift and decisive. Lami staggered. His mighty body, once full of power and rage, now slowed. And then he fell. The earth trembled as the giant crashed down, just as his brother had before him. His vision blurred, his strength faded, and in his final moments he understood. Vengeance had failed him. The war was over. The giants of the Philistines had fallen once more. But the story of Israel was far from finished. The climax and aftermath. And just like that, it was over. The battlefield lay silent, a vast expanse of stillness replacing the roar of war. The once mighty Lami, the last hope for Goliath's revenge, had fallen. His towering, formidable body now lay motionless on the earth, a stark reminder of a vengeance unfulfilled. The spear that once promised destruction and death now rested beside him, its deadly edge dulled by defeat. All the fury, all the blood price he had so desperately sought had crumbled to nothing, reduced to dust in the wake of his downfall. But is this truly the end of the giants? For centuries, whispers have lingered among the people. Some say that this battle marked the final decline of the Rephaim, the last remnants of the ancient giants who once roamed the land with fearsome might. They believe that with the fall of Lami, the bloodline of these mighty beings faded in the legend, their legacy lost in the mists of time. Yet others, however, disagree. They claim that the giants did not vanish completely. They say that their lineage survived in the shadows, hidden from the eyes of men, influencing the rise of powerful warriors and rulers for generations to come. Some even suggest that the presence of these ancient beings can be traced far beyond biblical times. Their echoes still felt in the strength and valor of certain leaders. But one truth stands clear. Israel had triumphed that day. The victory was not won by the strength of men alone. It was a victory achieved by the hand of God, a divine intervention that turned the tide of battle and reshaped the destiny of a nation. In that decisive moment, the power of the Lord had prevailed over the fury of vengeance, and the legacy of the giants was forever altered. But beyond the battle, beyond the clash of warriors and the echoes of fallen giants, there lies a deeper lesson, a lesson that speaks as clearly to us today as it did in ancient times. It is a message woven into the very fabric of history, a truth that guides us even now. Listen well to the words of the scripture. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. These words remind us that the pursuit of revenge is not our burden to bear. Lami sought revenge with all his might. He believed that by his own strength, he could alter the course of history. Yet what did his path lead him to? It led to nothing but destruction. It brought him only defeat and, in the end, silence. His fury consumed him, and his hope for redemption through violence crumbled into dust. David, on the other hand, chose a different path. He did not set out to avenge himself or to rewrite fate with his own hands. Instead, he placed his trust in the will of God and embraced the divine plan that had guided Israel through countless trials. Because of his steadfast faith, his kingdom endured and his legacy became a beacon of hope for generations to come. The Bible teaches us time and again that when we take justice into our own hands, when we let hatred and the thirst for revenge govern our hearts, we are likely to fall just as Lami did. But when we trust in the justice of God and stand firm in our faith, the victory is already written. This truth endures as a timeless reminder of the power of faith over the lure of vengeance. But this was not the last battle that David would ever fight. Even as Lami fell, even as the dust settled over the war, another enemy was rising. An enemy far greater than any before. One that would test David in ways he had never experienced. And David, our courageous king, was about to face his greatest challenge yet. A challenge that would call upon his wisdom, his strength, and his unwavering faith in the Lord. Join us next time as we uncover yet another lost chapter of biblical history, a story of war, prophecy, and divine destiny that will leave you in awe. And if you wish to hear more untold stories of the Bible, be sure to subscribe and remain with us on this journey. The adventure is far from over.